Hi, I'm Richard Montanez, creator of Hot Cheetos and one of the passionate few.
Hey guys, welcome to this episode of The Passionate Few. Today I'm going to be interviewing one of the highest ranking executives in North America, none other than Mr. Richard Montanez. But you guys might know him as the famous janitor who went on to invent Hot Cheetos to become the multi-million dollar empire that it is today. So Mr. Montanez, thank you for being on the show today.
It's a pleasure.
Yes. So first question I got to ask you, what's it like to go from being a janitor with no necessarily formal education to being the founder of one of the most viable, hyped products on the planet as Hot Cheetos, Frito Lay? What's that feel like?
Well, I can tell you that it's an incredible feeling. It's really hard to explain, but it's also a difficult one because you have to understand, being a janitor without an education, I really didn't have any business mentors. So there was times where I made a fool of myself and I looked ridiculous. So many times I went home crying to my wife, who's my inspiration, like, hey, I did it again.
Yeah.
Till the truth is, one day, I realized that in order to achieve your greatness, you've got to be willing to look ridiculous. Right. And I began to use that in my favor. So I got away from being afraid of looking foolish. I don't think, if you're afraid of looking foolish, you're never going to accomplish anything great. I think that's the first thing you got to get over with. Get over yourself. Maybe you don't look the part. Maybe you don't look like everyone else, but it doesn't matter. And I realized that. I mean, there was times that after story, I can tell you that, one day I'm, mopping floors. The next day I'm, in the executive suite.
That's
one day I've never been on a plane. Next day I'm on a private jet.
And I know one time I heard you speak and you said that you literally believe that part of your life was a miracle because one day you're mopping floors, the next day I think you were having dinner with the Obamas. Is that correct? President Obama and his wife. You were invited for like a big dinner or something?
Well, I mean, it wasn't Obama, but we had one of the first things after, creating Hot Cheetos, I got invited to the White House.
Wow.
And it was a White House dinner. I did have, dinner with the Obamas, me and my wife, his last year before he left, and that was a great experience. But we've had lunch or dinner with every U.S. president since that day. We've been invited several times. It just opened up so many different opportunities. But again, you don't know how to talk to a president. You don't know how to talk to a senator. You don't, especially when you've just been mopping floors, your whole career. So there was some things that I said, but I realized that people love the honesty. People love you. They don't want to see this outer person or this fake person. So I'd never tried to fake my way. I don't agree with, people may disagree with me, but I don't agree when people say, fake it till you make it. I've never, been one to agree on that. I've always said, learn it so you can earn it. Understand what you're doing. And I did that, even though I didn't know everything, I went out and, I watched other leaders. I watched how they dressed. I watched how they walked, how they talked. And I picked the ones that I wanted to act like. Yeah. So,
and you made your own mashup. And then
and I put it all, put a package together and this is what you get. That's why sometimes I don't match.
Yeah. But you feel good about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so take us back to how this all started. So where did you grow up? What was your childhood like? Give us some of that background.
Well, I appreciate that question. And, and those are, for me, emotional questions because it takes me to a place that I had hidden inside. And I finally realized, another thing that I realized, and I like to teach young people this, that sometimes you've got to go back to your past to find your future. And that's how it happened with me, is I went back to when I was a little kid. Actually in this area is an area called Guasti, California, which was one of the biggest wine producing areas in the country. People don't realize it was bigger than Napa Valley.
Yeah, I believe you grew up there, right, in the vineyards. You would pick grapes and stuff like that?
Yeah, my grandfather picked grapes, my dad picked grapes, and I picked the little grapes. And we lived and it was like an apartment complex. There were one room apartments, and in a row. And then the kitchens were community kitchens, like a restaurant. It was across from the apartments, so there'd be a big stoves there, a bunch of refrigerators, and then the bathrooms and the showers were like the high schools. They were away. So every morning I had breakfast with several different families. And never realized I was poor until somebody said, "Wow, you were poor," and I'm like, "Yeah, I was poor, but this might not make sense. It was a fun kind of poor."
Right. Yeah.
We never lacked anything, so.
And you make the best of it growing up. You don't know the context other than your household growing up. Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you have the basic, food, clothing, and a roof over your head, you can be happy.
Right.
And I think that's why one of the reasons I'm happy, because I have many possessions. But I was happy before I got those possessions. And while we're on possessions, I also want to remind people that sometimes people will say, possessions don't make you happy. Money doesn't make you happy. And I like to tell people, would you stop saying that? Let us find out. Because many times people who say that don't have any possessions, nor do they want you to have possessions. But there's nothing wrong with having possessions. There's nothing wrong with having money. You can do a lot of good things with money.
You can
so anyways, I picked grapes. I quit school. I hate telling people what grade, but I quit school at a young age. And
would you be willing to share what level of schooling you quit at, or?
Well, I'd say the highest level that I have is the 4th grade education.
Wow.
I never went to high school. I couldn't, when I started at Frito Lay, I couldn't read or write. My wife actually filled out the application for me.
How old were you at that time?
I was 18.
So this is what,
76.
1976, you started at Frito Lay.
Yeah.
And how old are you at the time?
I was 18.
18.
Now, this is 40 years ago, so.
Wow. And then your wife, you were married at that time, or she was your girlfriend at the time?
Yeah, she's my girlfriend. Then we got married after I got hired at Frito Lay.
Wow, so she got to see the whole story play out.
The truth is, the interview should be about her. Because she's the one that, she's my motivation and my inspiration, and continued to push it,
Wow.
We've been together, over 40 years.
Wow. How did you guys meet?
She was friends with my older sister. And as soon as I saw her, I knew she was for me. For some reason, when I was growing up as a little kid, I wanted a girlfriend named Judy. I love that name, Judy. And her name was Judy.
Oh,
and
man,
she was gorgeous. And I said, man, that's the girl for me. So I just,
that was
started dating her, and we hit it off, and now we raised three men, have 5 grandkids. We have a foundation, been together over 40 years, and young people say like, wow, you've been together longer than I've been alive. And they ask, do you still argue? How do you do it? And I say, I'll tell you what, we still argue. But my wife told me years ago, she made it clear, Richard, I was with you when you had nothing. I'm not leaving now.
Yeah.
But we have a good time.
Very cool. And then, so she was supportive when you started working at Frito Lay at 18, filled out the application for you, you said?
Yeah. Okay,
and then you get the job right away?
Yeah, I got the job. And you have to remember, in those days, I think I was at the, my job paid like $2.10 an hour.
Wow.
So when this came, it was going to double that.
Yeah.
Remember, we're still in the 70s, right? It was going to
make the
be
big bucks.
It was going to be like $4.50 or something, which was,
yeah.
For me, it was great. So,
wow.
Filled out the application, and I remember the guy, the HR manager, said, well, you can start tonight. And it was a graveyard shift, and I went home, told my grandfather and my dad, hey, I got the job. And it was just like, I just graduated from university, like, wow, a real job, a decent job, with benefits. I've made it, I'm no longer going to have to, pick grapes or do those things. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but for me, it's just I wanted more, so.
You want to take a step forward.
Yeah, and I remember my grandfather said, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm the janitor. And he said, when you mop that floor, you make sure that it shines, that people will know that a Montanez mopped it. Then my dad said, listen to your grandpa. You know that I took that on? That when I started working at the plant and mopping the floors, because keep in mind, a huge warehouse that I had to mop, I literally would hear my grandfather, and I would like mop that floor and I'd make it shine because I wanted people to ask.
Yeah.
It was so shiny that people were saying, hey, who cleaned the restroom? It smells good in here. And, you know, who mopped the floor? It's shiny. They say that new janitor. And I realized, too, that old, you know, Bible verse that says, you know, if you're faithful in the little things, he'll make you ruler over big things. And I've said that many times is you can't be great until you become good. You know, be good at what you're doing, and then you'll go. Some people want to skip that good. They want to be great. Well, you're not even good at mopping the floor. You know, you're not even good at taking out the that was my job.
Yeah.
And I remember friends would, you know, because you always got to watch out for the haters and
of course,
whatever. And I remember friends, I was so happy, and I got the job. Well, what are you? Janitor. Like, oh, you're just a janitor?
Yeah.
And I said this, you know what? There's no such thing as just a janitor. When you believe in your heart that you're going to be the best janitor in the world, there's no such thing. No such thing as just a waiter, bus driver, valet, any of those jobs. If you believe in your heart that you're going to be the best. And I believe that today. You know, I mean, there's no such thing as just anything.
And at that time, did you have that mindset, or was that a mindset you developed later?
It was coming, you know, during that time. I didn't realize that, you know, I would be using that, you know, throughout my leadership abilities. But it was there. I was like, no, because I guess, you know, growing up the way you grow up, you know, hard, and, you know, I grew up like, you know, I'm Latino, right? So,
right.
You know, everything that our parents taught us was work hard, do it right the first time, and you take those things that you learned at home, you know, out into whatever you're going to do, and you realize that, wow, these things are just as good at getting a college degree.
Yeah.
You know, for me, you know, I don't have a college, but I teach at universities across the country. So.
Yeah. And now you've gotten to speak all over the world and share your stories with people. That's incredible. Now, do you think that working as a janitor at that time, your plan was to just move up in the company, or were you just grateful that you had the job? What was your mindset at the time of what you wanted your life to, professional life to be like? You
know, I had no dreams whatsoever. I was not a dreamer. My dad and my grandpa were not dreamers. They were good men, but they didn't have time to dream, because you got to remember in those days they were too busy trying to put food on the table.
Right.
To them, the dream was, what are we going to eat tonight? Is there food? So I grew up with that mentality. I didn't really have a dream to be a doctor, to be a businessman. I didn't have a dream I didn't even want to be rich. You know, what I wanted to be was happy. So I never saw, you know, I would see, you know, people, you know, other men in suits and careers, and it was so far from me that I couldn't even get myself to dream about that. Right. Because again, as a kid, I was never taught to dream. Yeah. So even like, it'd be embarrassing if I said, hey, I want to be somebody in a tie. Hey, I want to be a manager. I want to be a director. I want to be a vice president. It was too, almost like awkward.
Yeah, it was so far-fetched.
Yeah, so I didn't have those dreams, you know, but I did want to be happy.
Yeah. Now, what do you think about what you would tell, what would your 18-year-old self, who started as a janitor, if you would have known that you would be where you're at today, one of the most powerful executives in North America, what would that 18-year-old say, looking at you now?
I think that 18-year-old probably wouldn't believe it, first of all, like, yeah. You know, because again, the way that we grew up and you know, none of that formal education that I think, you know, it's needed. There's a place for it, you know, but, you know, looking back, you know, when I was an 18-year-old, you know, as I said before, there's the things that I did a lot of things wrong. I did a lot of things that I regret. You know, some people say, you know, you should never have regrets. I have a lot of regrets. You know, and they're in that age group. You know, coming up until, you know, until I began to mature. You know, for me, I would say that I was always a hard worker. You know, but I was immature. You know, and then one day, my wife helped me to, you know, mature. And,
Judy.
Yeah, Judy did. You know, and one day it just clicked. Yeah. I just started acting completely different.
Yeah, it just makes sense.
And then I started dreaming, and a lot of it I know is she was at home praying. You know, we're spiritual, so we believe in praying.
Absolutely.
And I know that she was telling God, give Richard wisdom because he doesn't have any.
He could use some right now.
Yeah, and like a miracle.
Yeah.
This wisdom began to just fall upon me, you know, and I like to tell people I'm probably the most uneducated, brilliant person you will ever meet. You know, but I've learned that, and so 18, you know, 19 were you know, rough years for us.
For sure, yeah.
You know, we were trying to find ourselves. You know.
Was she working as well at the time, or?
Yeah, she was working. I don't remember where she was working, but she had, you know, odd jobs at the warehouse. I mean, she's a, you know,
you guys
hell
are
of a
both
worker,
hustlers,
man.
yeah, hard workers.
She works, man. You know, even now, you know, she doesn't have a job that she goes to, but you know, taking care of me is a full-time job, and also, you know, she helps run our, you know, our charity. So she's, you know, probably works more now than she ever has, you know. But there were tough years for us, you know. You can go back and, you know, decide, you know, do we pay the gas bill today or do we pay the water bill? You know, do we pay the electricity tomorrow? You know, just, you know, not knowing how we were going to do it tomorrow. You know, I like to tell people, you know, I was recycling aluminum cans, but it wasn't because I cared about the environment. I needed the money.
Right.
You know.
And this was at that time, at that 19-year-old age?
Yeah, you know.
So then you were working there, trying to make ends meet and trying to keep it together, 18, 19. And then at what point, I guess, did the Hot Cheetos thing come up? Because I know that there was some stir about Cheetos having an issue with some of their sales, and the idea came to you, or what's the famous story?
What happened was Frito Lay was, you know, going through a few struggles, and I'm talking about the whole division. So a new CEO came in who became my best friend, and he just sent out a video, because that was the communication in those days. You know, you either got a memo or a video. You know, there was no email, there was no whatever. So that was the technology. So he sent out a video, and they shut down all the plants across the country. In that video, he talked about empowerment. And this is the first time I ever heard that word, empowerment. You know, and he said, I want everyone in the company to act like an owner. And I'm sitting in the back with about 500, you know, front-line employees, and I grabbed it and said, man, do you guys realize what he just said? He's giving everybody the opportunity to act like an owner, regardless of what rank or what level you're at. And I'm thinking, does he mean it for the janitor too? You know, and I got a hold of it.
Do I get a say in this as well?
Yeah, so I'm like, well, let's find out. He's the CEO, so that moved me into action. You know, that word empowerment, you know, and again, you have to keep in mind, this was in the you know, well, when he took over, it was in the 80s, and corporate America hadn't really understood what empowerment was. You know, some companies today still don't know what empowerment is.
Right, yeah.
So
how old were you
then,
at this time?
I was in my 20s.
So you worked there from 18, 19, all the way into your 20s, and then you see that video about empowerment? Yeah,
I was in my mid-20s, I think it was, something like that.
And then that's when the spark was lit.
Yeah, well, I said, you know, what can I do to act like an owner? I didn't really know what our business was. I know that we made chips, but I didn't, you know, so I asked the salesman if I could go with him on my day off. And the salesman said, sure, you know, I mean, it was free labor for him. I would load the truck, and he said, well, come meet me at 5 in the morning. And I met him at 5 in the morning. We went to the stores, and he taught me how to fill up the racks, how to take the order, you know, and I was learning. And I've said this before, you know, and I believe it strongly, and I think every young person needs to understand. In life, all you need is one revelation to create a revolution. And I didn't know that then, but I was about to get the biggest revelation of my life that was going to create the biggest revolution in my life, but the revolution in my company that was going to lead to a revolution in the industry. So I like to say, you know, and I get excited about this, I like to say that, yes, I changed corporate America, and people will say, you're so full of yourself. And I say, I am. You know, because I know what I did, and I think that's something that we have to teach young people too. So I revolutionized how you see corporate America today. It's not the same it was 20, 30 years ago. This little Mexican had a big part in it.
What do you think is the biggest contribution to it, do you think, that you've revolutionized, or what's the biggest difference that you think you've made? Well, in the industry?
I think when, you know, how I got that revelation is I was looking and I saw all these spices, and then I looked at our products and like, we didn't really have a lot of spices. So that was a revelation. Create something with spices for those who enjoy it, you know. I mean, everybody loves spices today, you know. I mean,
But
at the
especially being
time-
Latino, yeah, you especially enjoy it.
Yeah, so that's what we decided to do. And then again, here comes another revelation. I didn't know what to do. I just okay, I got to make something. I didn't know what that was, what that would look like, what it would be, right? But I'm sitting in my old house, and here comes the elote man, and I buy an elote, and he puts the chile on it, the cheese, and everything. This is the truth. Remember, one revelation. What is a revelation? Something that was always there, but it's been revealed to you. So I took a bite, and when I looked at it, it was like, this looks like a Cheeto. What if I put chili on a Cheeto? A crazy, ridiculous idea. What are you doing?
Yeah.
So I went and told my wife, hey, we got to make some special chili. So I went to the plant and got some Cheetos with no cheese on it. Took them home, and me and my wife, we worked on a recipe. We tried this, we tried that. We finally got it down. She took some to work, I took some to work. Everybody loved it.
Wow.
I said, man, Richard, you got to call the CEO. This is great. Well, keep in mind, you don't call the CEO.
Right.
I didn't know any better. That's what I'm saying. Sometimes you've got to be willing, to do the things that you're not sure of.
And at the time, you were a janitor during this time? So you're doing all this as a janitor, thinking about it like a marketer, thinking about it like a businessman, and you're a janitor, not even taking into consideration that there's any limitation. You're just going for that revelation. Wow.
Because I believe the CEO. I believe the CEO when he said you are empowered. This is a warning and a blessing to every CEO in America. Don't tell your people that they are empowered if you yourself don't believe it. Because once somebody gets going, it's too hard to stop them. And I don't know who said this, but somebody said, once a man's mind has been stretched, it never returns to its original form.
Yes.
So many times CEOs have gotten in trouble because you're empowered, and all of a sudden, the employees don't feel empowered. So that's something, if you don't believe it, don't say it. And if you do believe it, allow them the opportunity. Well, this CEO was challenged himself.
What was his name?
Roger Enrico.
Roger Enrico.
He just passed away, and he was my mentor and just one of the greatest marketers in the world of all time. But I know it was also a challenge for him, because he threw that out. And then here somebody was taking him serious. It's just like, sometimes I think leaders will say, hey, you're empowered. And all the managers know that, but for you guys, we're just kidding. Because we need this to be out there that this organization is empowered.
Acts like this, yeah.
And that happens today, for PR purposes and whatever. So I, called them up, and that was in itself an incredible experience because, again, I didn't know you weren't supposed to call them.
Yeah, you just found his number.
Well, in those days they had phone books,
Yeah.
Today it's email, right?
Yeah.
But in the old days they had company phone books. So
Okay,
the
so like an
CEO
internal
would be
phone
there.
book, yeah.
If you wanted a director in Kansas or whatever, you'd find
Yeah.
it. So
And the CEO of Frito Lay?
Yeah.
So the CEO of Frito Lay's number is just right there.
Yeah, it's top.
Janitor, you call him.
Yeah,
No problem.
and when you're the CEO of the company, only another president of the division would call you.
Right.
So
Until Mr. Montanez came into the picture.
Yeah, so his executive assistant, who was an executive assistant, she knew something because she said, who are you? And I said, Richard Montanez. She said, well, what region do you run? I said, well, I work in California. She said, oh, you're the president of California? And I said, no, I work in Southern California. She said, oh, you're the SoCal vice president. I said, no, I work in the plant. She was, oh, you're the vice president of operations? I said, no, I work inside the plant. And this is true. And she said, you're the plant manager? I said, no. And she said, what are you? I said, I'm the janitor. And she said, hang on. And I talked to the CEO, and he says, I heard you got an idea. I began to tell him. I didn't really know how market spoke. I just began to tell him from my heart what I saw, what I thought. And he said, okay, I'll be there in 2 weeks. Hung up the phone.
Just like that.
Hung up the phone, and I was like floating. Like I did it.
Wow.
He's coming to see me. But I've always said this, and young people need to be prepared for this. I've said, I don't care what room you're in. There's always somebody in that room who's going to try to steal your destiny. And as soon as I hung up, I didn't realize the protocol that had just broken. So they started doing the phone calls. The president called the division president, called division vice president, called all the way down to the plant manager. Who is this Richard? Who let the janitor call the CEO?
Yeah.
So the plant manager comes running looking for me, and he tells me, starts yelling at me. Like, who do you think you are? You realize what you've done? Everybody's coming, and I didn't know. He goes, you're doing the presentation. And I remember I thought, man, I've never even done homework. How am I going to do a presentation?
Yeah.
So I go home.
To the CEO of Frito Lay.
Yeah, with the chief marketing officer, chief financial officer, everyone was there.
Yeah.
And went home, told my wife, and I told her, hey, I'm in trouble, and told her what happened. And, her strength, the leadership of a woman is just so powerful.
It's incredible.
People don't know. Follow a woman, man. A woman will get you there. A woman will protect you. A woman will teach you there. And I've learned that from my grandma, my mom, and my wife. I'll take a leader over me any day. So she said, calm down. We'll just go to the library and we'll check out a book on how to develop a marketing strategy. So I went to the library.
She calmed you down just like that?
Yeah,
just said, let's go to the library, no big deal.
She's a brilliant woman.
Yeah.
And that's why I've said, we have to understand that brilliance isn't a diploma on the wall. Not to take anything away.
Right.
But it isn't. Every child is born as a genius. Over the course of the year, it begins to die out because the world begins to tell people that you're not brilliant, your creativity is just because somebody doesn't see my creativity should never be the factor in why I'm stopping. And my wife has always been brilliant, so we actually copied like 3 or 5 paragraphs. And we put them on transparency, because remember, that was the technology of the day.
Right.
We put them on transparency. And I went and I bought my first tie I should have wore it today, for $3.50. Not this tie.
Oh, yeah.
My first tie, $3.50.
Wow.
And my neighbor made it in a knot the night before.
Oh, so it was ready to go in
the morning. I just put it, because I didn't know how to tie a knot.
What color was the tie?
It was black with blue and red stripes.
Wow.
Little skinny tie.
You still have it?
I still have it.
Wow, that's
I
incredible.
think I have a picture of it. I'll show it to you later.
Yeah, so you wear the tie, you're ready to go in the morning.
Yeah, and
Judy irons the clothes, I'm sure.
Yeah, my wife, telling me, hey, you know what? There's nobody better than you. You're the man of this house. Go get what belongs to us. Don't forget who you are. Don't forget your life. I was just like, wow,
Yeah.
Need to take her with me. So we got there, and it was a large room, and maybe 100, 150 people, but every senior executive in the company was there. Because remember, this is
a big deal.
This is when corporate America was still command and control. You had to be there.
Were you nervous at the time?
Oh yeah, I was. I couldn't tell you how scared I was.
How old were you at the time?
I was 26,
Wow.
something like that.
Yeah. So you're going in there 26, and then Judy comes with you?
No, she's still at home.
She's at the house. Let me know how it goes.
Yeah, she's.
Yeah.
But she prepared everything, and.
And you guys made the Cheetos, is that correct? You guys made samples or something like that?
Actually, what I did is I made 100 bags, and I bought some kind of like industrial Ziplocs. And I'm a little bit of an artist, not much, but I drew my own graphics. So, and when I sealed, you know how I sealed them?
How?
And this is what I say, were ingenuity.
Yeah.
I used the iron.
Ah.
So I put them on an ironing board, and at a certain temperature, it took me a while to get that temperature because they melted right through, but once I hit a certain temperature, it's sealed.
Oh, wow.
And when you looked at it, it looked like a bag that you could buy in the market. So I had it looking like it was ready to go. So I made about 100 bags.
Yeah.
And we let them out on the table. People were walking and saying, well, I didn't know we were going to market with these. They couldn't tell the difference.
And then the actual Cheetos themselves, did you and your wife actually have hand roll them, or did you have somebody at the plant do that, putting chili? What was your guys' process to actually get
I got the Cheetos before any seasoning went on.
Got it.
And I
before
brought
the
them home.
cheese.
So we had our.
Got you.
And because I worked at the plant, I could see how the process was. So what I did is I used, because you got to remember our research and development organization, our food technology, they're scientists. So they do everything scientifically.
Right.
Well, I took all that, did it scientifically, ghetto way.
Yeah.
I did it hood style, didn't
Yeah.
have any money, and it tasted great. So,
What did you guys use for the chili in the first samples? Sorry, I keep asking. I just really want to know what those first executives tasted when they got the idea for it. I mean,
well, that's a question I can't answer because
problem.
and the reason I can't answer because that's my wife's secret recipe that she first made.
Gotcha.
And she still makes some of the best salsas you will ever. I get you some. And we may go into the salsa business someday. I don't
There
know.
you
But,
from the minds of Hot Cheetos, yeah.
yeah. So that was her. My job was selling. Her job was really,
Recipe and all
do
that.
all that stuff, and because there was a different process. This tastes good. That tastes good.
Yeah.
But that's why I would like to tell people, we're from the hood, but I tell people, good things come from the hood, man. Sometimes you got to let your hoodness come out.
Right, yeah.
It's like, well, that's pretty ghetto. Yeah, but ghetto made me rich, man.
Yeah.
So I'm ghetto rich. Call me whatever you want.
Yeah, capitalize on what you have, yeah.
Yeah, so.
So then you go in, you do the pitch, you take the Cheetos, and there's 150 people in the room, give or take.
Yeah.
And you go up there and then you speak alone, or what's the setup like when you get in the room?
They introduced me, and again, every executive, from headquarters at that level was there. And I remember I walked up, and again, it was the transparencies, and those are kind of difficult. You got to just, I had it upside down. I was looking at, it's upside down.
Yeah. And you turn the light on, right? And there's like a projector.
So I really, I'm the janitor. I don't know how to do presentations.
Yeah.
And
did you practice the night before with your wife, like
No.
speaking points at all? No practice. So you pitched Hot Cheetos to the executives and the CEO of Frito Lay with no practice.
no practice. I let me put it this way.
Incredible.
Somebody say, "Why didn't you practice?" I wasn't smart enough to practice.
Yeah.
I was like, "Practice what?" I didn't know. Well, you should be ready. Well, I didn't know any. I didn't. There was no self-help books that anybody said read this or.
Yeah. And
I don't believe in 7 steps to success. Or anything.
Right.
I'm not putting it down as a book. What's success? I don't know. You tell me. If you're happy, you're successful.
Right.
Do whatever it does. And not for me, it was just like, let's just roll, man.
And the plant manager didn't help you out at all.
Not one bit. Not one bit.
Yeah. How does that plant manager feel now?
I don't even know if he's around, but it's kind of funny that I've outranked so many of the people that
Doubted you.
weren't believers. And I think that's also another testament that you got to believe in your people, because someday they may outrank you, and that's a good thing.
Right.
As a mentor, your job is to develop people that they become better than you. And a lot of people can't do that. But anyway, so there we were. I was scared. I finally got it, and I began to do it. And guess what? I was doing the presentation. It was going great. It was just flowing. I just read that, and then one of the marketing executives said, "I have a question." And talk about fear. I literally almost fainted. I don't know if you've ever had that type of fear where you're like a hot flash.
Yeah.
Like questions. We don't have time. Judy didn't tell me anything about questions.
This wasn't in the book. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like. So he said. Well, just one, it's a simple question. And I remember, it's like it happened a few minutes ago. And this was, 30 years ago. And he said, so Richard, it looks like a great idea, but how much market share are we talking about? And I remember the first thing I thought was market share. We haven't read that chapter yet. That's the first thing I thought, man, we haven't got the market share. And I almost fainted, and there was a door, and I said, you know what? This is what I was thinking. I'm going to run out that door. After all, I'm just a janitor.
Wow.
That's how scared I was. And you have to imagine when, as I said earlier, there's always somebody in the room that's going to try to steal your destiny. I don't care what room you're in. Always somebody in that room, and you have to be ready for that. And I didn't know any better. I was just like, like that deer that's going to get run over, that rabbit, like, oh my God, everybody's looking at me. And as scared as I was, there was something inside of me that was greater than my fear. And people say, what is this? And I said, this is the antidote to fear. Get this and you'll never be afraid again. I was hungry. As ridiculous as I looked, as foolish as I felt, my hunger was greater. And I'm gonna just go with I'm hungry because I'm hungry for a different lifestyle. I'm hungry for a change in my life. I'm hungry, I wanna do something different. I'm hungry, I wanna be somebody different. I'm hungry, I don't wanna be the same person. And some people say, well, you should never change who you are. That's not true.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be that person no more. I wanted to be, I like who I am today. And sometimes changing is also releasing who it is you're supposed to be.
I love that, yeah.
So,
and it's growing, yeah. Stretching yourself, expanding your capability, yeah.
I remember, and this is why we say that many times greatness comes in a ridiculous form. So I thought about it. Market share. I don't know what that is. How do you explain market share? Of course I know what market share is today.
Yeah.
But back then, you're talking to an uneducated janitor. I don't know what market share is. And, but I remember going to the stores with that salesman. And the racks are called gondolas. And I remember, well, the gondola is this big and this big. And I remember with the most ridiculous smile, I got it. I said, this much market share. And I believed it, this much market share. I was so happy, I got the answer, this much market share. I could hear from the marketers and the executives in the room, the whispers like, oh God, did he just say that? I could hear the poor guys, I don't know why they're saying that. Because I'm answering your question, how much market share? This much. But I'm hearing like, oh my God.
Did he really just say that?
Yeah, and then not realizing what I had just said.
Right.
And then the CEO stood up and said, ladies and gentlemen, do you realize that we had the opportunity to go after that much market share?
Wow.
That ridiculous statement made me a legend. But here's part of the story. It's not just the story of the janitor, it's the story of the CEO who looked beyond. See, this is what I like to tell people. When people saw what I was, he saw what I would become. When other people saw a janitor, he looked in and he saw $1 billion idea. He saw a high-level executive. He saw somebody that was going to change so many different things. And I think that's what we have to do when we look at people is what do you see? And it goes back a lot to, with the Bible and King David.
Absolutely.
When everyone saw a shepherd boy, God saw a king, one of the greatest kings ever. It's my favorite story. And that's kind of how it came into existence, Hot Cheetos. After that, my world changed, like I said. One revelation will lead to a revolution. And I created a revolution.
Absolutely.
And you can see just as well as I have the revolution that Hot Cheetos has created in the food industry. Hot Cheetos on hamburgers, on sushi, macaroni and hot. I mean, you name it, And for me, that's a great joy to see, there's a restaurant that's going to be opening up. It's just going to be, selling Hot Cheetos. And I love the fact that so many people are making money off my product. I love that fact.
Doesn't bother you.
No, heck no. There's enough for everybody. My pockets are full. I don't have no room no more. So why not allow other people? That's how you stimulate the economy. When we get these business leaders to start opening some doors, here's what I've always said. And I think, I say a lot to young people because I know that the base that I love talking to is that, many times people will say, I'm not in competition, but that's not true. You are in competition, but you have to understand this. You go to war with an enemy. You compete with people, friends, neighbors. If you're trying to sell that house, you're competing with a lot of other real estate agents. If you're trying to close that deal, you're competing with a lot of other people. The competition is real, but it's amongst friends. It's not going to war. And I've said this, that, in business, you should never treat it as a sport. Because in sports, there's one winner. In business, there's many winners. We can put a deal together, you and I, where none of us lose, that we're both, and I've said this, in order for me to win, you don't have to lose. You You know, and I think that's what I love, you know, teaching these young people. And that's what happened is Hot Cheetos just opened up it's changing the world.
Absolutely.
You know, you can say it doesn't. Well, you know, go back 20 years ago, there wasn't, you know, only the people that ate chile were Latinos.
Yeah.
In East LA, you know, now it's everywhere, you know.
That's incredible. And then after that first, that event where the CEO believed in you and then everybody started believing in you, how long from then until they tested it in actual markets? Was it pretty instant, a couple months?
No, it took about 6 months, which is actually pretty good process for a big company.
Yeah. And the whole time when they loved the idea, you're freaking out that this happened, right? Like,
oh yeah,
you
know,
can't even believe this is real.
Yeah, I'm just like, wow, what the heck? And I'm trying to learn, you know, the business. I'm trying to now I'm trying to act like a marketer, you know, and I'm trying to
act like you belong here.
Yeah, I'm trying to, like, you know, fit in and all that stuff. I'm trying to dress different. You know, I'm trying to talk differently. You know, I'm looking up words. I'm starting to read now. You know, I mean, for 30 years, you know, I read a book a week.
Yeah,
you know,
that's incredible.
I have an elaborate library, you know, and you know, I wrote my first book. I'm working on my second book. You know,
A Boy, a Burrito, and a Cookie, correct? That's the name of your first book.
You know,
yeah.
So I write motivational letters that go out to a couple 100,000 people, you know, once a quarter. So, you know, I've turned from not being able to read and write that I consider myself a pretty good writer, you know.
Communicator, yeah.
You know, so.
That's incredible. And then when you go home from that event and you tell Judy, is she just over the moon about the whole thing, that it went well? Or what was her reaction when you got home?
Oh yeah, she was like, you know, I knew you could do it. It's just, you know, and she's always been like, this is just the beginning.
Yeah.
This is just the beginning. She's put so much in my head. It's unbelievable. This is only you're just experiencing this and everything that she's like a prophet, you know, because everything she's told me has come to pass.
Yeah.
She said, you're going to do all, she told me one day, she goes, you're going to stand before kings. You're going to stand before great men. People are going to seek your wisdom out. And I'm like, you know, but why? Why would anybody seek out the wisdom of a fourth grade dropout, you know, who's a janitor? But I learned that, you know, wisdom is completely different than something that you get in education. As I said before, brilliance is in a degree on the wall. And it came to pass in 2003. You know, I spoke at a session at the United Nations. You know, I've had one-on-ones with some of the top CEOs in the world.
Yeah.
Seeking my advice. You know, I won't give you their names just to protect their privacy. You know, and I teach at some of the best universities. You know, and people want to pay me big dollars to get on my calendar.
Absolutely.
You know, and all that came to pass. You know, all because I decided to be who I was supposed to be.
Wow.
You know, and that's why I encourage all the young people to just, just go for it, man. If it's looking ridiculous, and if you can't get beyond ridiculous, you're never going to be great.
I like that. If you can't get beyond ridiculous, you can never be great. I like that. And then when the Hot Cheetos went to test market a couple months later, 6 or 7 months later, did they do well right away? I know they put them in test markets, right? Only in Latin dominant areas because the Chile,
they put
right?
it in test market in East LA. And there's a certain number that, because we're a big organization, absolutely. I can't give you that number, but there's a certain, multi-million-dollar number that we need to hit. If we don't hit that number, we'll scratch it.
Right.
You and I may want it, but
right.
It's not big enough for us. Yeah. And it didn't reach that number. So I got a note that, hey, Richard, nice try. Not gonna, but there really wasn't a whole lot of muscle behind it because it didn't come from headquarters. So it was almost like, this is hard to say, but it was almost like there was a group of leaders and executives that really wanted it to fail because it broke traditional.
Right.
Smart people are paid over here. You're kind of like just got lucky. The CEO wanted to talk to somebody, but it was beyond that. But I learned that later.
Yeah.
So there was
that they kind of might have had the sentiment of, hey, we're paid big bucks to come up with these ideas. How did a janitor come up with it? So when it comes out, they're not going to look for ways to make it work. They're kind of just going to be like, well, it didn't go so well. Sorry.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's exactly what happened. And so, anyways, talking about ingenuity, what you learn from being poor, what you learn from coming from the hood. That's why I've always said there's so much brilliance in the hood. I mean, it's incredible. If you take the time to look, I mean, look at tattoo artists.
Right, yeah.
You know, making thousands of dollars now, started off as taggers, painting cars now. Somebody has, you know, they do speakers, you know, they have 5 auto, whatever you call it, shops and stuff like that, you know. It's not always about this, you know. That's why I love going into the audios. I love going into I really do. I get so much inspiration and there's so much innovation.
And so much potential there, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I've realized that, you know what? I got a team of my family, my boys. Steven was there. Steven will tell you some great, I should have brought Steven here. He'd tell you, they can tell you that. They remind me, remember when we did this? Steven and my wife used to sell tortillas door to door.
Yeah.
To make extra money.
Wow.
You know, and money's the last thing we ever have to worry about. But we did those things.
Yeah.
You know, so
that's incredible.
I realized I had to get to those markets. So what I did, I got a team and we would go into the markets and then I saw the hot Cheetos, they were small bags. There'd only be like 1 or 2 bags.
Right.
So I'd walk in there and we would buy those bags. I was acting like a customer. And I'd tell the owner, because they were little stores, I was like, man, have you tried these? These are good. Yeah. And he's like, no, I didn't even know we had them. Yeah. And I go, well, I wanted to buy more because everybody wants some. There'd be like 5 of us in one store. Yeah. He goes, oh, I'll tell my guy next week to drop off. So next week, he would see his salesman and say, hey, bring that hot stuff. Yeah. You know, there was no marketing behind it. There was no whatever. Yeah. So we would go to different stores. Before you know it, we'd come back and there'd be a whole rack. Wow. And people were just like, what is this? Word of mouth. Yeah, yeah. Word of mouth. And before you know it, we had one of the biggest new product launches in the history of the company. Yeah. You know, you go to, you know, any store, Hot Cheetos is in the top 3. It's either number 1, 2, or 3. I don't care what store it is. It's going to be, you know, whatever. Yeah. But again, you know, we got it to a certain place and it began to grow. It began to grow. And, you know, little by little, we took off Southern California. We went to the West, we went to the country, and then, you know, and then the world. And the rest is history. Yeah, and then I started creating other products. Yeah. You know, that was this was my first child, but, you know, I started doing anything that you see hot. Right. Yeah, because I know there's Flamin Hot Fritos, and then you guys had the Asteroids for a while, like the bottles with the caps. I posted a thing actually for people to ask questions, and someone asked, when are those Asteroids going to come back? I know everybody wants to know. You know, I get so many DMs and tags on bring Asteroids back. Yeah. You know, and everyone's waiting. Am I going to do that? You know, and the answer is yes, but I don't know when. You know, and I even tried to post. I said, you know, I need 2 million people to ask. Yeah. And there was a petition. It was 30,000 signatures. 30,000 is nothing. Right. And I think, you know, the business people don't understand, you know, to make an asteroid and all that, to go into production and do that, you need a certain number of guaranteed sales on a daily basis. Right. You know, and I don't have time on Instagram to explain that to everybody. Right, yeah, so nor do they have the capacity to understand. But if you understand business truly, you can't make that, because you'll lose money. Mm-hmm. You know, and so we're thinking about it, you know, and the announcement will be coming soon. You know, I'll let you be one of the first to do it, you know. Okay, and, very cool. But it's someday, you know, but I just can't tell you when. Yeah. You know, so. Wow, that's cool. Okay, no problem. We'll take that. And then as far as the Hot Cheeto products, I know that you guys stem to do it on everything, right? So is the Flamin Hot your creation? Is that trademark? Is that what you created? Or how does it work with how you've taken it to apply to other chips and stuff? Yeah, that's something that we own. We created that whole brand and, you know, everything. But, you know, when people begin to use that, I'm okay with it. Mm-hmm. You know, as long as they don't change it or, you know, do whatever, you know, get into the, you know, certain trademark rights, you know. Right. It's okay because, you know, other companies just can't use them, you know. Right. We need to have a partnership and, you know, but when individuals want to put them on their shirts and sell pins and, you know, a lot of these snack shops now are doing Hot Cheetos you look
Yeah,
at it. Man, I love that. You
Enjoy
know, just,
that, no problem.
You know, just remember where it came from. It's the only thing I ask. You know, sometimes you got to show respect. And I love when people will show me a picture of the product they created, and they send it on my Instagram, DM me, and I look at the pictures. That's a sign of respect.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know.
And then when it hits off in the markets, I mean, you're in your mid to late 20s at this time, right? When it starts to really pop off.
Yeah.
And you're just probably just tripping out, like, oh my God, how's this happening? A few years ago, I was mopping floors, and now here I am traveling all over the country with this product that's phenomenal. What's going through your head at this time? Were there a lot of surreal moments for you? I mean, what was that like?
Yeah, you know, I couldn't walk into a store without going to and telling everybody that I did that, you know.
Yeah.
My whole family, and, you know, was taking pictures, and they'd go to every store. And that was the feeling like, oh my God, you know, it's like, I still can't believe it. I still can't get that feeling that I did that. I'm telling myself I did it, but it's just so, like you said, surreal that, like, how did this happen? Judy, we did this.
Yeah.
You know, and I did that for a couple of years.
Wow.
And then I realized there was an awakening in my leadership principle. Then I realized that the Hot Cheetos isn't the story. The story is the leadership opportunities. The Hot Cheetos was a platform to get me out there. So after that, you know, I started concentrating on what a leader was about. And really that's what I found out my calling is to, you know, it's leadership. Not so much, even though I've developed so many products, even though I know business, I've done this and that, and you name it, I realized that my true calling was to develop others. And I've said this, you know, I think when it comes to leadership, and everything that I always talk about when it comes to leadership, it's my thoughts. And many times they'll go against big names.
Sure.
You know, because sometimes I look at big names, it's like, you know, you sold another book, what did you do with that money, things like that, you know. And but I think when it comes to leadership, my principle is that, you know, there's 3 levels. That at one point, everyone is a pioneer. Somebody says, you're a pioneer. I said, no, I'm not a pioneer. I was, but I'm not pioneering anymore. And then at some point, you got to become a settler. See, sometimes people say settlers are bad, like, oh, you've settled. But here's what pioneers do. Pioneers is map out new territories, and they bring settlers. And what do settlers do? Is they build infrastructure.
Right.
Without settlers, there'd be no towns, there'd be no cities. Without settlers, there'd be no Apple.
Right, yeah.
You know, Steve Jobs pioneered, but it was the settlers who put the infrastructure together. So at some point, you go from pioneer, and I settled. And then you get to the point, to the 3rd level, which I call the ultimate leader, and that's a purposeful leader. I'm a purposeful leader. And what is that is, my role now is to help other leaders find their purpose. You know, and a purposeful leader is kind of like a grandfather. You know, your children, you know, you may have spanked, you may have had rules, but your grandchildren, it's none of that. It's about mentoring and developing them to be everything. And that's what I do, you know, is I develop other leaders to be everything. My goal for every leader that I develop is they become better leaders than me. That's the ultimate leader, and that's a purposeful leader. But again, you got to be a pioneer at some point. You become a settler, and then you grow into becoming a purposeful leader. So I realized that Hot Cheetos was my platform for all that.
Right. Wow. And then at that time, I know too that you probably experienced a different type of income and financial opportunity than before. Was that something that was hard to deal with? I mean, was that, obviously that must have been pretty surreal, but a lot of people that we interview that have these stories encounter a lot of challenges from family and friends. You know, people start getting weird around them when money gets into the picture. Did you deal with any of that? I mean, what was that like to go from, you know, in your early 20s not having much, and then to the later part of your 20s that being a different story? I mean, what was that like for you?
It was fun. Fun from going from poor to, you know, rich. But it did bring issues. You know, people who I thought were my friends were no longer my friends. People thought I have changed, you know, and in some cases I did change, but I think it was for the better. You know, and I've said this before too, and I think people need to understand that money, you know, wealth and riches will never change you. What they do is they reveal you. Who I was with money is who I was going to be. It didn't matter. I think I became a better person because I was a bigger giver. You know, we started a foundation. We were doing more charity work and things like that. But yeah,
What's your guys' foundation focused on?
Just feeding people and, you know, helping kids with that are going to school, back to school. We give thousands of backpacks. We buy shoes for kids that can't afford them. We feed family. It's kind of like going to Disneyland and everything's free. You know, we don't give away anything you use. Everything's brand new. We give away bikes, sports equipment, computers. We do scholarships.
That's awesome.
It's just, you know, what we can do. It's not a lot of people, just my family. You know, as I said earlier, I don't do any fundraising. You know, if somebody wants to give, then that's fine, but I'm not going to give them a plaque because it's not about us. It's about.
Certainly.
And I heard, you know, when I began to see my bank account, you know, I haven't checked my bank account in years. You know, I don't look at my how much my bank statement or anything like that.
Yeah.
You know, that's what you call financial freedom. When somebody says, "How much do you got? How much?" I don't know. I don't check. You know why?
Yeah.
You know, or when I buy a new car, somebody says, "Did you get a good deal?" What does it matter? I wanted a car.
Yeah.
So those things do change. You know, you don't have to worry about those.
Yeah,
things,
about the little stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, but.
Do you find that it makes life easier? A lot of people grow up and aspire to have a certain amount of wealth. Do you find that, you know, being at that level now, that it does indeed make your life maybe not happier, but a lot easier? Would you say that that's pretty true?
Oh yeah, it's can still be complicated because now you need lawyers, now you need PR, now you need managers and agents, and you know, and I have to watch certain things, but the benefits still outweigh the negatives, you know, and it's still, you know, I've said this before, you know, if I'm going to be sick, I'd rather be rich than, you know, sick and poor.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm going to be depressed, I'd rather be rich and depressed versus poor and depressed.
Yeah, like the expression they say, money doesn't buy you happiness, but everybody wants to find out for themselves.
Absolutely, you know, and I think that's true, and I think we have to give people the freedom to go out and again, you know, you have to be careful because those who become, you know, envious of your success, you know, will try to hold you back, and sometimes you just got to break ranks. There's certain people you got to get out of your life to achieve the life that you want, you know, and I had to do a lot of that, you know, and it hurt, you know, but me and my wife just, you know, we can't hang with these people anymore because, you know.
Toxic.
Yeah, you know, and even the little comments that they would say, and you know, I remember when I bought my first house, you know, I went from, you know, my old house, you know, could fit into my bedroom, you know, and when we bought our house, people were like, you know, why are you buying this big old house? Why are you, you know?
Yeah.
Very few were like, wow, Richard, this is beautiful. I can't remember anybody
who was
saying
supportive or kind about it. Yeah.
So we were kind of like timid, you know. It was hard for us at the very beginning to, like I said, you know, sometimes you got to break out. You know, we humbly say this, that, you know, that we're humble and we want to stay humble. But there comes a time when you got to get your ego out of the way and tell people, you know what, I'm a great person and I can do these things. You know, people were saying, why do you do it? My answer was this: why do you feed 100,000 people a year? Why'd you buy that house? Why'd you buy this car? This is what I love to say: because I can. Simple as that. I'm not going to argue with anybody anymore. And you have to get to that point. You know, as long as you're doing what you feel that God's called you to do, and as I've said earlier, you know, with those type of finances and success comes the responsibility.
Absolutely.
And I realized that my success wasn't for me. It was a responsibility to my fellow man, to help them whenever I could. And God said to me years ago, take care of my kids and I'll take care of your kids.
Wow.
And ever since then, you know, everything that we do for these kids out there, you know, it just comes back 100 times. You know, it's almost like the fruit never ends.
Yeah.
They just keep picking, just keep picking, just keep picking, you know, if you do the right things.
Absolutely.
Sometimes the well will dry up, and sometimes it needs to dry up. I believe, you know, I'm teaching a class, and I think you've heard a little bit of it. I'm going to be teaching about, there's going to be coming a redistribution of wealth. You know, certain wells are going to dry up, and redistribution doesn't mean it's gone. It just means it's being redistributed in a different way.
Goes elsewhere, yeah.
And individuals are going to have to line themselves up to be in position to be on the receiving end. That's the hardest thing to get people educated on. Is they'll believe that it's coming, but to get them to move from here to over there, that's my path. That's why I do what I do. Is I'm trying to educate, because I said there's so much out there. There's so much out there that there's enough for all of us. We can all be living in that same neighborhood. We can all have more than enough. We can all have private jets. We can all buy. But those. And for me, giving back is what I like to be extravagant in. I know I spend a lot of money on clothes, but I don't drive the $1 million cars. My kids tell me, why don't you buy Ferrari? Why don't you buy a Lambo? And I get tempted, but then it's like, nah.
You get a red one. Get like a little red Ferrari and just call it a Hot Cheeto.
Yeah, maybe someday and stuff like that. But for me, my extravagance is in my giving. We spend a fortune on shoes, food, clothing, things like that. And
where can people find out more information about your nonprofit if they want to?
We don't. It's called One Light, but we don't advertise it because, again, this is a family thing. And people have said, "Hey, let me run it," but I'm not trying to make it a national organization with a big budget. Nobody gets paid.
Right.
Everything comes out of our pocket. So we keep it low key.
That's awesome. And then, how long have you guys been running the nonprofit for?
I think about 14 years.
So you guys have touched what, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people's lives?
Probably millions now, because now we've sent food, across the world.
Wow.
So we've fed, thousands, and I can tell you how it started. It started on one Thanksgiving. Is my oldest granddaughter. I think you met her. Her name's Lexi.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. She was 5 or 6 at the time, and we just finished Thanksgiving, and they had always, my sons had always seen us, me and my wife, feeding the homeless on our own. We would make sandwiches and go out. We weren't with a church or an organization. We just go do it on our own. It's like I tell people, what are you waiting for? You don't have to wait for the government, the church. Just go do it.
Yeah.
You got some bologna and people are hungry. I'll eat it. And so we used to do that. So my kids started doing that and started taking their children, my grandkids. And one day Lexi said, "Hey, Mom, can we make leftovers sandwiches and go feed the homeless?" And I was like, man, that just broke me. Like, wow. It's a dream come true. That's my legacy.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's my legacy. And so they did that. So the next year, my daughter-in-law made an extra turkey just for sandwiches. So we had our turkey, and then they carved that up and made, a couple dozen sandwiches, went out. Well, the next year, they made 12 turkeys, and we had something in a park where there was a lot of homeless, and we fed a couple hundred people. The next year, I went to 500. So then I think the third year, we got a stage, we got a sound system. We started to do we started to do things. We do back to school. We've given away like 2,000 backpacks at a time, full of school supplies. We do free haircuts. We feed everybody lunch. We give every family a box of groceries. Every kid that comes gets a brand new pair of shoes.
Wow.
We started giving away sports equipment, and we saw that 5,000 people were, and this is just my family.
Wow, yeah.
So we had to get security, we had to get permits, we had to get porta potties, and we had to get cooks, barbers. But I realized it was a dream come true, because, I said I didn't have any dreams, but I remember one dream in particular is when I was a kid, they didn't have food stamps. They gave you food. And I remember every Tuesday, I'd go with my mom to walking to pick up food. And I remember they would just like kind of give it to you like.
Like just kind of throw it at you like you're one of many.
And I remember that was always hurtful, and I just thought that someday I'm going to feed kids and people with dignity as a little boy.
Oh, wow.
40 years later, that dream comes true. We give everybody, we don't make them feel like they owe us anything. We give it to them with dignity. But it started because of my granddaughter and my grandkid, And for other people who have children, this is the best thing that you can do. I want them to remember this, I wanted my kids to know what hunger was without experiencing its pain. How do you do that? Is by feeding somebody who's hungry. Because I know what it is to be hungry. I don't want my kid to know that. It's painful. But I want them to experience it in a different way so they'll know that what hunger is. Because I think, like I said, hunger is the antidote to fear. If you're hungry, you're going to accomplish the things you want. So.
I like that, yeah. And it comes back full circle to what you were saying, because in that room, the first day you pitched Hot Cheetos, you had that sort of anxiety, that worry, that, you know, life wasn't the easiest, but then your desire to be hungry was just so much more powerful that when the two fought, the hunger won. And I love that. It's a good way to come around full circle.
Yes, you know, you hear sometimes people that, again, you know, careful which leaders you follow. Some leaders will say, you know, go get what you want. Don't worry about what he or she has. I did. I saw people like, I want what he has. I want what she has. How do you get that?
Yeah.
You know, forget about, you know, what I'm at right now. You know, you have to, you know, go for it. And it's worked for me. You know, I've modeled myself after, you know, certain key leaders, you know, that I respect. Well, I mean, Jesus Christ, you know, I think he was the greatest marketer in the history of marketing. You know, here's a man who marketed his product across the world and never traveled more than 200 miles. Here's a marketer who, you know, started his thing 2,000 years ago, and his product is still being marketed today.
Yeah, worldwide.
You know, so I mean, you look at his marketing principles. You know, his leaders. You know, how he governed, how he mentored, how he cared about it. Those principles. You know, I don't think enough is taught on his principles. You know, his marketing strategies, his business strategies. You know, the things that he saw, how the people that he picked. Everyone that is picked today, these are the requirements. His requirements were simple. Will you follow me? I mean, come on, you know, I'll get you to that point. But no one wants to get people to those points anymore. They want you to already be there. It's impossible. Yeah. In my days, I was fortunate that I had leaders who saw something in me and helped bring that out.
Yeah, and the fact that you took action. And I think that's the thing too, that a lot of people, not just young people, but older people, feel like, oh, well, you know, I'm just this, or I'm just a janitor, or I just work here, or I don't have a college education, or, you know, they have all these excuses. In your experience traveling all over and meeting all these people from all walks of life, what have you found to be the biggest, I guess, crippling or limiting belief that a lot of these people have? What's the biggest handicap that you see a lot of people have who want more for their life but just aren't getting it?
I think, you know, I appreciate that question, because that is, that's $1 million question. You know, and it's one thing, and what it is, it's ego. See, when people say, everybody has an ego, I don't care how much you deny it.
Even you?
Yeah, we all have egos, but here's what you have to understand, how the ego works. See, the ego works when you're up on top. It'll tell you that you're the greatest thing when you're not. And the ego will work when you're on the bottom, telling you you're the worst thing ever when you can be on top. So I think what happens is, and here's what happened for me, is my ego got in my way. My ego said, well, you're just a janitor. You're not good enough you're not as good as those guys over there. So you have to put your ego to the side. And that's the part that needs to be talked about more, is the ego, because most people think it's the ego that you're all that, but that's not what I'm talking about. The ego works to keep you from becoming who you're intended to be.
Yeah.
So as I've gone out there and I've met, you know, waiters and janitors, it's been their ego who said they're not good enough. See, that's your ego talking. You know, when your ego tells you how good you are, that's bad. When your ego tells you that you're not good enough, that's bad. And you have to understand, you know, that you do have an ego. And once you admit it, you can deal with it. You know, because for years my ego held me back. I was never one who walked into the room like, I'm the greatest thing that ever happened. Because my ego said, you'll never be the greatest thing that. I had to tell that ego, get out of here. I'm going in this room by myself. Because guess what? When I walk into the room, I'm going to be the greatest thing. Because I finally realized that as individuals, we have the capabilities to walking into a room and controlling the environment versus allowing the environment to control us.
Absolutely.
And that's what the ego, and that's what happens when, you know, when you don't understand. And so many times, my greatest joy is telling the janitor story, the waiter story. Because when I'm done speaking at a gala, I have a line of waiters waiting for me, and to be able to do that. And I think that's the true leader, is when I can talk to the top CEOs in the world and I can talk to the waiters, because I see them as leaders themselves,
as equals, and they feel comfortable with you because they know that you know both sides of the fence.
And I believe it.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas most CEOs or executives might think like, oh, they're not at my level, I can't talk to them. But with you, they see something powerful because they think, he was where I am now. If he could do it, I could do it. And that's probably why so many people resonate with your message.
Yeah, and I always tell a lot of people too, hey, you're probably a whole lot smarter than I am. That makes them feel better.
Yeah.
Because the days of being the smartest guy in the room are gone.
Right.
And that old, quote that if you're the smartest guy in the room, you're in the wrong room. You need to find those rooms where somebody's smarter than you. But to be the smartest guy in the room is what you do is you just hire the smartest people. And what other people need to understand, and this could be, offensive in one way, is that intelligence is a commodity. We can buy it. It's expensive, but it's a dime a dozen. You can buy it. Wisdom isn't. Wisdom is probably the most expensive thing that you can get. Because wisdom comes through mistakes. And I think people that are trying to get to that next level, who have failed many times, need to file that under wisdom, and it builds their confidence. Like, how much wisdom do you have? Man, look at all the things that I failed at. I tell people, I never passed a test in school in my life.
Wow.
Never have. But in life itself, out of school, I've never failed a test. And you know how it is with God. I mean, you get the test first and the lesson second. In school, you get the lesson, then the test.
How important has God been to you, or your faith in God, to get to where you're at now? I mean, because it seems like even at the beginning, you and your wife were both very spiritual. Do you find that was an important role every step of the way?
Oh yeah, I think that God and the Bible were my educators. Everything that I learned, if I were to give any man credit, it'd be him. If I were to give any book credit, it'd be the Bible. His principles, the encouragement. And I think that's another subject for us that, ministers have changed the statement so bad that they've chased people away. But the Bible has always been attractive to draw people. And when you are explained and read it the right way, it's attractive. It brings people it tells you that you're good enough as you are. So many people take from the Bible, especially motivational speakers, and they write books based on it, but they fail to give the true author the credit. And I've always said, be careful who you follow, because sometimes it's just about making money, and so God has been our everything. Even today, we pray a lot, and everything that I move has been based on what is the next step for me. He is my leader. He is my general. He is everything. He's my CEO. And as much as respect as I give my CEO, believe me, he's going to get it all. If he says, go over here, I'm going to go over there. If your CEO tells you to go do something, you don't question it. He pays the bills. Well, guess what? God pays my bills.
Yeah, it's been working well so far. Why stop
why
now?
am I going to change it now? So.
And then now you've evolved to a stage where you're not just at Frito Lay, right? Because Pepsi acquired Frito Lay. So your role is currently vice president in Latin markets and dealing with sales and stuff like that. Day to day, what's it like being an executive versus your roles prior? Because I think a lot of people are intimidated by the thought that they too could one day become an executive, or that they too could participate in conversations and be of value. So what's been your experience seeing both ends of the fence? Is being an executive as intimidating as people aiming to be that would think it is? Is it not really? You earn your stripes. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, what's been your insight? What wisdom could you impart to people out there that think executives are this big intimidating thing?
Well, when I was first coming up, you know, I always thought that executives didn't do anything. You know, it's kind of like,
Yeah.
you know, they just said yes or no, and then I realized executives are some of the hardest working people you will ever meet. And I've seen different types. If you go back to the beginning of my career, before empowerment was introduced, corporate America was a command and control. So executives were hired and groomed to be, I command and I control. Do what I tell you to do. And then we come into an empowered, and I think it's even becoming even more where leaders have to be more inspirational. So I think, you know, some leaders are just finding who they are. You know, they were the command and control, and they're becoming more inspirational leaders. And I think, you know, when you see that and you recognize that it's less intimidating because you realize that, well, you know what, that's what I like the stuff that you do, you know, everything that you do, you're like an executive, you know, at a Fortune 100 company. That's what the way you present yourself, the way you want to inspire people. The smart CEO, the smart companies know that that's what they want as an executive. So I think the field is even greater for young leaders than it was when, you know, because in my days it was a command and control. I don't know if I want to do everything that I'm told to do the way you want me to do it. I don't know if I can be, because you had to be cutthroat. You had to, you know, in today's world, you know, in most companies you should be able to call the CEO. You might take a little heat, but it's not as earth-shattering as when I did it. It still is in some companies, you know.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, corporate America today is looking for the conceptual thinker. You know, it's no longer, the truth is, it's no longer about the intellect. If you look at corporate America and how everything was built, it was built on the left side of the brain. But everything, you know, we've experienced.
It's really interesting.
We've experienced a revolution that the next leaders, the next generation are going to be right side. It's going to be the conceptual thinkers. You know, the first, in our economics, if you look at how this country was built, it was, first revolution was the farming. You know, it was a revolution because we had some of the biggest farms and the equipment. The farming revolution in the 17th, 18th century led to the industrial revolution, because we needed farming equipment, tractors, and that's where the big car agencies came from. The GEs of the world came from the industrial revolution. That industrial revolution led to the technology revolution with the Lockheeds and the GEs actually came in, they existed. And if you look at that technology revolution, it's primed us for a revolution that we've never seen, which it comes from the conceptual thing. All that past has been left brain thinkers. And it's even hard today for some of the leaders who are left brain, because they want everybody to think the way. And I wrote...
think the way they do.
I wrote a little bit, something in my book about this. There's a chapter I talk about leadership. I said, you're either a pharaoh or a deliverer. And what is a pharaoh? A pharaoh is a leader who takes people captive to build everything in their image. A deliverer is someone who sets people free to be everything they were intended to be. You're one or the other.
Wow, I love that.
You're one or the other. You cannot say you're not. You're either a pharaoh or you're a deliverer. And for every CEO that's running a Fortune 100 company, they need to understand that the pharaohs are dying out, and we need the deliverers, because the best thing that you could do is help somebody to become a Richard Montanez, to be... The company benefited way more than I did.
Right.
And I found my calling, but my calling is beyond just, my company.
Right.
It's opened so many doors. So, it's a good time right now to be an executive, especially for the conceptual thinker. Don't have to be the guy that 2 + 2. I mean, I wanted to be the guy like, what's 2 + 2? What do you want it to be?
Yeah.
The conceptual thinker, someone who can take me into. And I've said this too, I'm the type of individual is that I want to see the things that other people can't see. And I teach in my leadership workshops, be that leader that sees the other things that people can't see. Everyone else can see that. Everyone else can see that green. But when you get somebody who can see the green and there's purple in it and start painting, that's the person I want to hire. Because as I said before, all you need is one revelation. What is a revelation? Something that was always there, just been revealed to you. And there's so many revelations waiting to come out.
Yeah.
You know, but you got to go into the unseen.
Yeah.
You know, so you need to have the eyes that can, you know, see those things.
And then the hunger to bring it to life.
Absolutely.
I love that. And then in terms of your legacy, right? Because now, I mean, it must be an incredible feeling till this day to see people eating hot Cheetos all over the place, right? I mean, what does that feel like for you when you see people eating hot Cheetos? And obviously, I'm sure you've seen people where they don't even know you're the creator of it, or they don't know anything, and you just kind of smile to yourself, you know, private victories. What are those moments like? You still have that? Does it get old? I mean, what's that?
No, you know,
feel like?
I love that. I love, you know, when I'm in the grocery line and I see somebody, you know, we were in Malibu, me and my wife, and we stopped in a Target, and we were getting some snacks or something. And the lady in front of me had a bag of hot Cheetos, and she was pregnant, and she opened the bag, and she was eating them while they were, and she was, I can't wait, and she looked at me, and she was, I apologize, but I'm sorry, I can't wait, I love these things, and they're my favorite snack, and I couldn't resist.
Yeah.
You know, I said, you don't have to apologize, I'm the creator, and she's like, she's just stunned, like, what?
Wow.
She said, what do you mean? I said, yeah. So, you know, she wanted to take a photo. I mean, I love that. You know, I really do. You know, because it brings the happiness and joy. And here's the other thing too is.
And to think that people once doubted you, right?
Yeah.
And then now moments like that. I mean, how does that must be just an incredible feeling.
It's an incredible feeling. But what I remind people is that, you know, everything I did, I never did anything to prove anyone wrong. I never did anything to shut the doubters. I did everything for one thing, back to the hunger.
I love it.
Hunger was my motivation. Getting back to you wasn't showing you that you were wrong. I mean, they feel good now, but that wasn't my motivation. My motivation was strictly hunger.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I want to say about hot Cheetos, to go with this question, is I started getting followers who had, and this is, you know, very, very emotional, but I started to get followers that had children with cancer. And I didn't know this, but, you know, when they go through chemo, they lose their appetite. And doctors found that hot Cheetos would help them with that. So parents would buy their kids hot Cheetos, and I started to get tons of messages. Thank you, God bless you for. I'm like, what? Yeah. So for me,
that's incredible.
It ended there.
Yeah.
If there wasn't anything else, that was, you know, and a couple, I went and visited, you know, I bought them a case of Cheetos and I bought them, but they would show me the, you know, the pictures, you know, and it was just so interesting how doctors discovered that the hot spices helped to
stimulate the appetite.
Yeah, so it was good for them. So that was like, you know, such a joy to see that, you know. And I think when you look at a God idea, you don't know how big it is. If somebody said it's just like hot Cheetos, you know, you just did. There's no such thing as just anything. It's huge, you know. You know, it opens up so many doors, and you know, I mean, so yeah, I still love it. And
I can relate to that too, because even though, like with our show, the reason that revelation came to me to interview people to a younger audience, you know, it started out as a passion project. I had no idea that I literally get messages almost every single day from people in different countries that listen to the show, that were inspired. And so I can kind of relate to you on a micro level in that I had no idea, just like you had no idea, that the chips would help people dealing with cancer, you know, and you would have messages from all over the world or people online. I know exactly what you mean about acting upon something that just feels powerful inside, and the magnitude of it that you can't even imagine. And so it's amazing to hear that from you. In terms of legacy, what do you hope when people remember the story of Richard Montanez, past, present, and future? What do you want people to take away from your legacy?
You know, I'm not, what I tell people, I talk about my legacy a lot, and you know, if you look up the word legacy, it's a word that, in the 16th century was used, in contracts. It was associated with legalities. It was a legal word.
Oh, wow.
It was, and the truth was a legacy was something that, today it's something that you will, but a legacy, the word actually meant something that you gave. So for me, a legacy isn't something that I leave. A legacy is something that I give. And if you look at, some of the two greatest men that I've admired is, Dr. King and Cesar Chavez. Dr. King didn't leave a legacy, he gave a legacy. He gave his life. The same thing with Cesar Chavez, is these men were givers, and that's what I want to be remembered in my legacy, is that I gave, because the day that I'm gone, people will forget who created Hot Cheetos. But that little girl who comes to my event and we bought new tennis shoes and a backpack, she will never forget. No matter how old, she'll be a grandma herself, and she'll remember that family that came? That's my legacy. My grandchildren who are now helping, with our charity, that's my legacy. My legacy is not, my bank account. My legacy is not in the things that I've accomplished. My legacy, I want it to be in the things that I gave. I want people to remember that I'm inspired giving. It wasn't about how many I spoke to, how many books or how famous. It's simple. My legacy is, I was a giver. And we're on that path. I'm not expecting to leave anywhere soon, but
yeah, absolutely.
My legacy is in place and intact.
Love that. And then in closing, what would be some of your best insight, wisdom, philosophies after all these decades of experience being on multiple ends of the fence? If you could look into the camera, into someone's eyes, or people listening to this on audio on the podcast, and just give Richard Montanez 60 seconds of bottom line wisdom, what would you tell people from all walks of life about how to take their life to the next level?
Well, I appreciate that very much, and I think there's so much that's out there, and I would say that the one thing that you need to understand is that you have to be careful what you're listening to and what you're reading, because there's so many quotes, especially with Instagram, social media, Facebook, so many quotes out there that just aren't true. Somebody said you get promoted by who you know. That's not true. You get promoted by who knows you, and someone, said, so many different things, but what happens, they get inside of you. So, find these books, find these speakers, get this stuff that's in you that'll really change your life. And understand this, there isn't a book out there that's going to place anything inside of you to become successful. Everything that you need to become successful is already inside of you. Your job is to release it. So I don't spend money on books that say, follow these 7 steps, because guess what? They're not going to work. You already have it inside of you. Your job is to release it. So I always say, be careful who you listen to, what you're reading, and what's coming out of your mouth. One of my greatest proverbs is life and death are in the power of the tongue. You've got to be confessing good things in your life. You got to be saying that, yes, I am great, with humbleness, not with arrogance, but you've got to say it. You've got to be the first that believes in yourself before anyone else believes. I've always said that, it's great when somebody believes in you, but it's fantastic when you believe in yourself. And that's what's going to change your world. So thank you. It's been a great time here.
No, absolutely, yeah. And then I did want to ask 2 more questions that popped into my mind. One of them is going to be from Brian Roberts, who is a listener of my show. He's a big fan, and he can't wait to listen to this interview, so I'm going to give him a special shout out to Brian. Brian asked, did you ever along your journey use any visualization tactics? I know that it might have been more so in the form of prayer for you, but was there anything you did to sort of build those prophecies, to create them mentally before they became a physical reality first? Was there any of that you and Judy worked on?
Absolutely. What was his name?
Brian Roberts.
Brian, that's a great question, because that was all of it. Everything was my imagination, my creativity was flowing through. We began to visualize, and here's a good example. Me and my wife, we went when when we were dating, we went trick-or-treating, but we would never trick-or-treat in our neighborhood because it was so poor. There was no candy there. We'd go across town to the rich neighborhood.
Yeah.
And we would
good candy.
Yeah, you get the big candy bars, and we would look at these houses, and me and her would think like, how does someone get these? You know, and you know, after a couple of knocks, people would tell us, hey, you need to go back to your side of. That's what it was like, you know.
Yeah. Wow.
Back in our days, you know. But we would keep those memories and those, you know, visions in our mind that, you know, what it was that we wanted out of life. As a matter of fact, we used to, when we were very, very young, we used to write things down, and we would lock them in a little box and not read them for years, you know, for 10 years, and we'd pull them out like, oh, wow, it worked. So we would write things down. That was our way of visualizing, like, what do you want? We want, and again, these are our wants, not our needs. We want a big house. I want a lot of money.
Yeah.
I want nice cars. Do I need any of those? No, but I want them. Yes. You know, put it in perspective. You know, this and that. I want to be this. I want to be that. I want to change. I don't want to be a dummy no more. And I would see myself. You know, I'd see myself in the White House. And I did a presentation on Capitol Hill. I'd see myself shaking hands with the president. I wouldn't tell anybody. I'd be at home in the living room thinking like, okay, these are the things that I did practice. Here comes the president. Yes, sir. Pleasure. I saw myself speaking at the United Nations, 1,000 ambassadors. I saw it in my mind, you know. And guess what? Everything that I saw in my mind, because where does it begin? It begins in the mind. You know, where does it come out? It comes out the tongue. So I began to see it, then I began to speak it, and everything has come to pass. So that's why today, me and my wife, we're thinking other things. You know, I'm teaching now. Forget about being rich. I'm teaching now, become wealthy. Because rich people still live check to check.
Right.
The check's bigger.
Yeah, but so's the overhead.
Yeah, but it's still, you know, wealthy people no longer worry about where it's coming from. It's just coming in. Wealthy people don't have to work anymore. Rich people still do. You know, so go from becoming rich and become wealthy. You know, so we're looking at those things, you know, we're visualizing, you know, helping more people. We're visualizing doing, you know, so many different things. So that's a great question, but it was, you know, it's what changed our life.
No, that's beautiful. And then the second question that I had was, what were some of the failures along the way that were hard to overcome, or some of the biggest lessons along the way, right? Because now we know the story and how it panned out great and your impact, but I'm sure that even at a high level of accomplishment, accolades, finances, all that, I'm sure there's still a lot of problems. What were some of the biggest ones you dealt with, and how did you overcome them?
Well, that's a great question too. And well, you know, when I first started my career, before I actually became an executive, I never got any of the jobs that I wanted in Frito Lay. I wanted to move up. And I applied for that, and I remember interviewing, and I was never smart enough. I never had the resume, you know. So those were disappointments, and those were hurtful for me, because I would look back, and it took me a while to get over this. I'd look back like, man, I made every mistake you could possibly make, and now it's coming back to haunt me, you know. And I finally realized that, you know, as much as I hated my past, you know, that it wasn't always going to haunt me. But those were my disappointments, the things that I did. You know, people would like, well, you didn't finish high school. How can you become a technician? You know, you need to know math. Like, oh, right. So every job that I always got, but again, because I'm just following what God had, the jobs that I did get were a whole lot better than the jobs that I wanted.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I just learned to just kind of to flow with that. But there was so many disappointments. You know, quitting school and failure. You know, like I said, I used to cry because I would embarrass myself. You know that I speak everywhere now, and you know, and I'm booked, and you know, but there was a time when, you know, I didn't know what words meant, and I would make a fool of myself by saying incorrect words. You know, and I'd look back on it, but that's how I learned. You know, I had to overcome those things. It was, you know, that's why, you know, you need to find those mentors. You know, to help you overcome your insecurities, you know, your immaturities, and the things that, you know, a good mentor does that. And you know, for your, you know, your listeners, they need to understand, for so many people desire to be mentors. But you have to understand what a mentor is. A mentor isn't a coach. You know, a mentor is not somebody who coaches you. You know, a mentor is a father, a mother, a parent. And let me tell you a story about mentor. You know, this is a story about this general, and this general was being sent to the front. And the general knew that going to the front meant he wasn't coming back. And he had a son. So he went to his best friend and he told his best friend, I'm going to the front, which means I'm not coming back. Will you take care of my son? And the general's friend told the general, I will raise him like my own. You know what the general's friend's name was? It was Mentor.
Really?
That's where the story Mentor comes from.
Wow, I did not know that. That's
so
incredible.
Mentor is raising somebody like your own child. Too many people say, well, I mentor him, I mentor her. You're not a coach. It's about adopting someone like their own. So when you call yourself a mentor, you better have no insecurities, because a father desire, a mom's desire is their children become greater than them. That's what mentors do. But that's where mentor comes from. So
I love that. It's powerful. And then at the end of every interview with every guest, we play a game called First Things First. So how the game works is I'm going to list off 10 words or phrases that come to mind, and then you tell me the first word or phrase that comes to mind as a response back.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah.
So it's pretty easy. So we're going to go into that. So you ready? All right. So the first word is going to be God.
God and me.
Second one's going to be freedom.
Finances.
Third one, Hot Cheetos.
Finances.
Judy.
My love.
Obstacles.
Many.
Wisdom.
Trials.
Your past.
My past. Hurtful.
Your present.
Beautiful.
And your future.
Gorgeous.
I love it. Mr. Montanez, thanks for being on the show.
Pleasure.
And
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. And then I got to ask, I know that you even turned down Oprah. So what made you willing to be able to sit down with us and share the story? I would love to hear it.
Oh, it's easy, man. You wouldn't stop asking.
The power of persistence, hunger, right?
No, I was, yeah, it's funny, but I was impressed because you wanted to interview the man, not the title. And I know when you came to hear me speak and you introduced yourself, that said to me that you wanted to know the story. Because sometimes you got to be careful. Your story is your story. And who you share it with and how they share it with is so important. So you don't just, I'm not trying to be famous.
Right.
You know, so that's easy for me. That's why I've turned down so many interviews from high-level personnel, because it wasn't about me. It was about the Hot Cheetos. It was about whatever they can do to get a bigger audience. You're trying to inspire people.
Absolutely.
And this is what I got to tell people too, is people need to understand that Hot Cheetos didn't make me. I made Hot Cheetos.
I love that.
And I think that's why I was attracted to, you're hungry. Just showed to me, I love that in young people. Is show me you're hungry. Keep knocking, don't take no for an answer, and sure enough, you kept, sending me messages, and I said, I knew at the very beginning I was going to do it.
Yeah.
The struggle was finding the time, but I knew, through your persistence and who you were, and I saw your show, what you were doing. I said, yeah, that's something that I could be a part of, because, we'll be linked in forever. You can't take this away. No one can. So who you link yourself in is very, very important. And even going on forward, you look for those. There's some people that are famous that I'm not going to be in a relationship with them.
Right.
And somebody says you're judgmental. I am.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely.
You have to, and I think those are part of those quotes too. Is there's things that you have to judge. Judge it accordingly. I'm not condemning anybody. Go do your own thing. I don't condemn anyone, but that doesn't mean I have to be friends with everyone. I still have problems with certain things. I'm still trying to get to the next level. My wife is there helping me. I've said this before, like, hey, I wear a tie every day, but I've said this, don't let this tie fool you. I can take it off and you and I can go outside and talk about it. And my wife said, no, you're not like that no more. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that's right. No, I didn't mean that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that Judy wisdom. yeah.
You know, but you know, you try to stay true to who you are and your value. And that's why I go back to the Barrios and the hoods of the world. There's so much brilliance and creativity in there. People look at those places and think it's a bad, but it's nothing. I said there's no bad kids, only kids in bad environments.
Right.
Give those kids what suburbia has, and you have the next president of the United States, you have the next doctor, you have that. We have to invest, and that's why I do a lot for minorities. You know, and I don't tell everybody that. And some people even try to call me out, like, well, you know, you got a lot of money in cars and all that. But what do you do? But I don't tell people that. You know, but one of the reasons that I do it is, and I've said this: look, if you don't help that poor child, you know, someday that child could be a burden or a blessing to your kids. Work with them now so that your kid doesn't have to. Let's get them off welfare. Let's get them educated. There's more than enough for everyone. You know, as I said, you know, before, and even in my book, when it comes to, you know, we don't have a food shortage. What we have is a distribution problem. You know, there's enough food to, you know, there's enough housing. Look, we're the only country in the world that spends billions of dollars on buying and renting space. You know, it's a $1 billion industry. We buy stuff to store it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, people's garages are full of stuff. So, and what do? You go out and rent another store and you fill it up, give it away.
Yeah.
I've done that. Me and my wife have gone through so much stuff and give it, and guess what happens? It fills back up.
Yeah.
You give it, you'll never run dry. So, but
absolutely, like they say, the secret to living is giving.
Absolutely.
My man, Mr. Montanez, thanks for being on the show.
Pleasure, man.
Big inspiration. That's it, guys. Thanks for tuning into this week's episode. We'll see you guys next time. Take care.